Zoe slowly opened her mouth a little bit to show a little bit more metal. I can't see. Wider. Reluctantly, the girl opened her mouth, displaying the braces caked in dust. The woman peered to have a closer look. You need to clean your teeth. They're disgusting. Nasty creature you are. Zoe closed her mouth and nodded in agreement. Sheila looked at her stepdaughter one last time, shook her head in revulsion before turning to leave. Zoe smiled. She'd got away with it for now. She waited to hear the key turn in the lock and then turned towards the wall. Her boy band poster was upside down. She prayed the ones with the back to front hair would never find out she'd put the poster upside down. He was Zoe's favourite, and they were going to get married. He just didn't know it yet. And on a slightly more urgent note, thank goodness her stepmother had missed the fact that the poster was no longer the right way up. Zoe spat out the braces and wiped her dry as a desert tongue on her sleeve to try and remove some of the dust, and then went back to work. All through the night she scratched and scratched until she finally broke through. Her braces were now a misshapen mess. She tossed them aside, so happy to be nearly there. Zoe excitedly let her fingers take over now, scratching away to make the hole bigger, crumbling bits of plaster off in her hands as fast as she could. Zoe wiped her eyes and peered through the hole. She had no idea what would be on the other side. Taking a closer look, she realised she could see a face she knew. It was Tina Trot's. Of course, Zoe had always known that the bully had lived somewhere in her block of flats. Her gang permanently occupied the adventure playground, and what's more, every day Tina spat on Zoe's head from a stairwell. But Zoe had no idea the horrible girl lived that close. Then Zoe had a thought that made her confused. This meant it was Tina's family who shouted at each other and slammed doors more than even her own. It was Tina who got screamed at by her dad and who Zoe had felt sorry for as she lay trying to get to sleep at night. Zoe shook her head to get rid of the strange new sensation of feeling sorry for Tina Trotz. Then she reminded herself of another sensation, flog on her face, and she stopped. It was now mid-morning. Zoe had been scratching away all through the night. On the other side of the hull was Tina's big, ugly face, snoring. She was lying on her bed, which, as if in a mirror image, was placed in exactly the same place as Zoe's was in her room. The room was bare of possessions, though. It looked more like a prison cell than a little girl's bedroom. Tina was wrapped up in her grubby duvet. For a young girl, she snored like a camel, loud and low, and her lips wobbled as she exhaled. If you've ever wondered what a snoring camel sounds like, it goes something like this. It was a school day and Tina should be in lessons by now, but Zoe knew that most days she bunked off, and when she didn't, she came and went as she pleased. Now Zoe was face to face with her worst enemy, yet there was no turning back. Everything in Zoe's room was covered in a thick dust as a result of her excavations. As soon as her stepmother unlocked the door to come in and check up on her, it would be game over, and she would never see Armitage again. Right now, though, Tina's big, scary face was right on the other side of the hole. Zoe peered at the bully's surprisingly thick nostril hair, wondering what on earth to do next. Suddenly Zoe thought of a plan. If she could grab a corner of Tina's duvet, she could tug it sharply through the hole. Then as Tina rolled onto the floor, Zoe could climb through the hole, jump over her, bolt out through Tina's flat to safety. It now occurred to her that she should revise the chance of death for the digging plan to high. At that moment, she heard her stepmother's footsteps thundering down the corridor. Zoe had to act fast. She reached her hand through the hole, took a deep breath and tugged as hard as she could on the duvet, which was rather greasy to the touch. It was as if it had never been washed. The yank was hard enough to send Tina rolling onto the floor. Just as Zoe heard the key turning in her bedroom door, she clambered through the hole. Unlike a rat, though, Zoe didn't have whiskers. And even though she was an unusually small girl, she had rather underestimated her size. And when her body was halfway through the hole, she had become completely and utterly stuck. Try as she might to wriggle, she could not move an inch. Tina, now of course had woken up, and it would be an understatement to say that she did not look like she was in a good mood. She was angrier than a great white shark who had been called a rude name. The bully rose slowly to her feet, looked at Zoe, started pulling violently at the small girl's arms, doubtless so she could get her whole body through the hole into her room to beat her up more thoroughly. "I'm gonna get you, you little runt," she growled. "Oh, good morning, Tina," said Zoe, her tone imploring a non-violent response to this unusual situation. Meanwhile, no doubt hearing all the commotion, Sheila had rushed into the bedroom behind her and grabbed hold of her stepdaughter's legs. The odious woman was pulling as hard as she could on them. "Come here, when I get me hands on you," screamed the big lady. "Good morning, stepmother," Zoe called over her shoulder. Again, the chirpy tone did nothing to pacify the woman holding onto her ankles. Soon Zoe was buffeting backwards and forwards through the hole. "Oh!" she cried as she was pulled one way. "Ah!" she cried as she was pulled the other. And soon it was like she was singing a rather repetitive pop song. "Ooh, ah, ooh, ah, ooh, ah, ooh, ah." Backward, forward. Soon after that, the wall started crumbling around her as she was yanked backwards and forwards. Tina was strong, but Zoe's stepmother had weight on her side. It was a surprisingly even tug of war, which as a result felt like it would never end. Both were pulling so hard on Zoe's limbs that she screamed. As she screamed, she was aware of one positive to the situation. Whoever won, Zoe would at least be taller at the end of it. She felt like a particularly prized Christmas cracker. However, just like a cracker, she was sure to explode. Large bits of plaster were now crumbling off the wall and onto her head. "Ah!" cried Zoe. A massive crack blasted across the wall. Crack! All of a sudden, Zoe could feel the whole wall giving way. Soon it came crashing down to the floor in a blizzard of dust. Boom! The noise was deafening, and soon all Zoe could see was white. It looked a bit like this. Okay, we're going to go on and have a third part now. Okay, so I'll turn off, click straight onto the next bit and see if Zoe escapes.